and welcome to all of our Gold viewers who are here with us today. I'm Kristin Schwarz, licensed midwife and one of the MCs here at Gold. And here at Gold, we're getting ready for our Gold Midwifery Conference of 2024, getting started there in February. And with that, we also have a beautiful add-on package that is titled Comprehensive Care for 6 Newborn Challenges. And with me here today is Carol Smyth, one of our speakers. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, Kristen. It's lovely to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. I know your title for the presentation is From Distress to Regulated, Holistic Way to Comfort an Unsettled Baby. Sounds lovely. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Carol, where in the world are you?
So I'm in Northern Ireland, and I'm not too far from Belfast, which is probably where everyone will have heard of in Northern Ireland. I'm about 10 or 12 miles north of Belfast.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I always find it fascinating. I'll ask all the speakers where they are from because I love
Hmm.
it to connect with experts from around the globe. And this is such an international conference. Our viewers are from all around the world. So it's lovely to have expert speakers and to connect with and learn from from all over the world, which is wonderful. So let's talk about your background here. You
Yeah,
are an IBCLC and also a psychotherapist. So
yeah,
tell us a little bit about that.
yeah. Yeah, it's I kind of came full circle, I suppose, in my career. I actually started, I did a degree in psychology. That was my degree many, many years ago. And then I didn't really do anything with psychology. I went into other areas, and I trained as an IBCLC. After a good little while after I did my degree, but the more I started seeing parents, and the more I started seeing, that distress, that anxiety that parents experience whenever they've got unsettled babies, that I thought, I need to get back into my psychology here. So I went and did a bit more, did my postgrad degrees, and became a psychotherapist. So I really try to bring both sides of the knowledge together whenever I'm working with parents. So I use my IBCLC skills, um, looking at, the feeding problems and the behaviors and all of these different things. But then I'm bringing in the psychotherapy, the psychology side whenever I'm looking at attachment and the distress, the anxiety, the mood, and all of that comes with dealing with a baby that can be quite unsettled. So it fits really nicely together because that perinatal period is such a vulnerable time for people's mental health.
It is so vulnerable. You're absolutely correct saying that. Where were you, Carol? I wish I could have met you when I had my little ones. It is such a vulnerable time. And I love that you have that background because, as you mentioned, it is full circle, really a
Hmm.
holistic way of and helping families because it is such a vulnerable time. And, the parents are sleep deprived, recovering
Yes.
from birth. And
Hmm.
of course, their little one is there, and if it's if the little one is distressed, the parents are distressed,
Absolutely.
and even when we try our best, sometimes these little ones don't get settled, right? And then
Yeah.
as parents, we feel inadequate, we feel
Yes.
wrong. We should be able to settle our babies. Then not helpful advice from relatives and
Hmm.
come
Hmm.
comes on top of that, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
this is a very difficult also and a big stress on the parental mental health, as you mentioned.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's a huge thing. And I love that the first thing that you mentioned there was sleep deprivation, because sleep deprivation, it predisposes us to feeling more anxious. And
Right.
if you are already a little bit anxious because you're not getting enough sleep, and then you're dealing with a baby who is crying, that crying makes us feel anxious anyway, because
Yes.
it has this physiologic reaction in our body to make us respond to our baby. So it ramps up our anxiety massively, and we desperately want to try to solve this problem that we've identified with the crying. And so it leads parents to trying all sorts of things. Once they've tried the usual kind of list of things, is my baby hungry? Is my baby,
Hmm.
do they need their are they hot? Are they cold? Any of these things. Then parents start to desperately look at the internet for what could be the other reasons that my baby is crying. And without any guidance, they are blaming themselves and taking stuff out of their diet and,
Yeah.
trying all sorts of interventions, which often don't have any effect other than making the parent even more distressed and even more anxious, and the baby is still crying.
Yeah, and it is such a, you said the internet, the internet can be wonderful with information, but it
Hmm.
can also be unhelpful because
Yeah.
we get bombarded with information, things that being trying to be sold to us, as in
Hmm.
tinctures and
Yes.
tools
Yeah.
and what, and then some helpful advice like put your baby on a schedule and a feeding or
Hmm.
even things like that that could be detrimental to the baby, right? But
Absolutely.
parents are absolutely on their own. So us as healthcare providers, I think we need to do a better job to really educate on what to expect, right? Have you seen this too? That I mean, I can speak for myself here. When I had my first baby, I never even held a baby before, maybe
Yeah.
once, but I had no siblings or close family. That have babies close to me. So I really had no idea what to expect. And I feel like there's many people like that in our, nuclear families, how we
Hmm.
live nowadays,
Hmm.
right? So talk to that a bit, Carol.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And with my first baby, exactly the same. And, whenever he was born, he was so settled for the first couple of weeks. And I thought, "Oh, I've got the perfect baby. This is wonderful. I've got this cracked. I know what I'm doing." And then he started to cry. Between that 2 and 3 weeks period, he started to cry, and I became really worried, and I was trying all sorts of things. And I see that all over and over in the parents that I'm working with. And that's what the research tells us happens with babies as well. So one
Hmm.
of the things that I'm talking about in the talk for Gold is that babies actually go through a distress curve or a crying curve in the early weeks of life, where this is completely normal and expected, that they will be pretty settled for the first 2 weeks. And then somewhere around that 2 to 3 week period, they begin to cry more. And the crying actually increases and increases and increases up till about 6 weeks. And it peaks there, and then it starts to tail off again. And that this is normal, it's expected. There's something neurodevelopmental that is happening that causes this crying. And I think if more parents understood that and
Hmm.
were able, that would really help them navigate that period much better, with much less anxiety, much less distress, and much less. Let's face it, parents are spending loads of money on all sorts of interventions to try to stop their baby crying as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Normal infant behavior really, it need to be talked about
Hmm.
more because, to prepare parents to really know what to expect. And there are things we can do, right, when the baby is crying like that. And sometimes though, it's hard to know. Is it physiological? Is there
Hmm.
something really wrong with the baby, or is just normal crying? It's really not that easy to tell sometimes, right,
It's
Carol?
it's not. And I suppose we've got a process of elimination that you go through, where
Yeah.
we know that some level of crying is going to be normal in all babies, and all babies are
Hmm.
going to go through this curve. But quite how much crying is on that curve can be different for different babies. So we know that around 6 weeks, an average amount of crying is around 2.5 hours, somewhere between 2 and 3 hours anyway. That's a lot. Whenever you think
Hmm.
about crying, that's a lot. But some babies will be on the lower end and might be crying, maybe only like an hour a day, and some babies will be crying 5 hours a day. So there's a really big difference there. Um, so we know that it increasing, peaking, coming down again is completely normal. But we do also know there might be something different that's going on with the babies that are crying 5 hours a day compared to the babies that are only crying a couple
Hmm.
of hours a day. And there is a process of elimination that we have to go through there, figuring out what's different about these babies that are high crying. And so what I'm doing in the talk is going through different theories and how you might determine what might be some of the reasons for the higher crying, looking at things like the family gut function and gas production and
Hmm.
diet, or looking at um, uh, whether food sensitivities are something that might be happening here, or whether that parents are just reaching for the internet and just pulling out foods for no real reason with no good indications. And
Right.
looking even at things like migraine, because
Right.
migraine can be linked parental, and we can look at whether there's a history of migraine in the family. Um,
Fascinating. Hmm.
but the other thing that I really talk about is this neurodevelopmental curve as well, and that we know that actually the high criers and the low criers, they they begin crying about the same amount. So they have the same number of crying bouts in the day, but the high criers don't seem to be able to stop crying once it's switched on. So there's things that we understand about the developmental control of starting and stopping crying as well, that is different between the high criers and the low criers. And that's something I think would be of great benefit for parents to understand as well, because it would massively reduce anxiety if they understood that, okay, my baby started crying there because they'd got a dirty nappy, and I've changed it and I've solved the problem, but they just haven't been able to switch off the crying. This problem is actually solved. It's okay. They just haven't been able to switch it back off yet. They'll switch it off soon.
Ah, that's such a relief, to have
Hmm.
that kind of information for many parents to know, okay, so, because it can be so detrimental to, parents'
Yeah,
confidence too. They're
yeah,
thinking they're doing so many things wrong when, when they think a baby, usually a newborn sleeps and eats, and it's not
yeah.
always the case only,
No,
right? So it
absolutely.
it is great information. You're giving away so many great tools and information in the presentation itself, how to educate the families we work with as well. And Carol, you have a book, so let's talk about your book for a little bit.
I do, yeah. So I've got a book on reflux, because one of the things that I have noted over the last few years is that lots of babies, when they do start this crying at around 3 weeks, or maybe as it starts to increase, or in 4 weeks and 5 weeks, parents obviously, whenever they are searching for a reason for this, they will automatically get a lot of people that jump on and say maybe this is reflux. And it
Hmm.
seems to be it seems to be a lovely explanation that appears to fit. It fits
Right.
our
Right.
narrative of what might be going on, because we can't see it, and therefore maybe it's an explanation for this crying that we can't understand. Um, so yes, so I've got a book on why infant reflux matters, and it really talks through, what the theory is behind this, and why maybe that doesn't fit with this crying curve, that it doesn't really make sense that acid would be causing this distress curve that peaks at 6 weeks and tails off, because that doesn't fit with what's happening with reflux at
Right.
all.
That is interesting, very interesting, and good information. And yes, often this is something parents are being even told from their care provider, like you have to take
Hmm.
the baby to the pediatrician. Often, oh, this is reflux.
Absolutely.
Here's the medication, and parents are often grateful for that thing, for that diagnosis, because then they feel, oh
Yes.
yeah, something must be wrong, so I was, now I can fix it, right?
Yeah.
And then when that doesn't work, they're back at square one. So I can see how that really is, important knowledge to share what you're doing in your book, to really
Hmm.
make sure to understand it better. Is the book, would you say, for parents, for care providers, for both? How would you?
I would say it's for both. So it's split into two sections. So the part one is really all about the theory and trying to, educate a little bit, and I think that's really helpful for both. And
Hmm.
then part two is, it's like a self-help guide. So it's a series of questions to ask yourself about what are these symptoms that my baby is experiencing, and different things to try, that might help resolve them. So it's really good for parents to work through, but it's also a good guide, I think, to help practitioners when they are working with parents, because they can step through that guide themselves as well.
Wonderful. Well, Carol, thank you so very much for sitting down here with me, chatting and talking about the beautiful work you do and the presentation for our add-on package. Thank you. It was such a pleasure having you here today.
It was a pleasure being with you, Kristen.
And now some information for our viewers here. If you're interested in this presentation, From Distress to Regulated, a holistic way to comfort an unsettled baby, and the other presentation in this lecture pack, please visit goldsmidwifery.com. This is an add-on package to our main conference. At the goldsmidwifery.com, you find wonderful information about the entire conference. It is a live conference held in February, but everything is recorded, so you can always watch that at the time that's convenient for you. So thank you everyone for watching, and I hope to see you at the conference. Bye bye for now.